The wind whipped fiercely across the icy streets of the city, carrying snow in sharp, swirling gusts that cut through even the thickest coats. Leora worked late into the night in her small workshop, hands covered in paint and soot, carefully assembling a delicate mechanical bird. The warmth of the furnace glowed around her, offering a rare comfort against the frozen world outside. She was used to cold nights, but tonight something felt different, as though the wind carried a message she could not yet understand. A soft, desperate cry pierced the howling storm. Leora froze, straining to listen. The sound was faint but unmistakable, fragile and full of fear. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside, the snow crunching beneath her boots. The streets were nearly empty, the city's usual bustle replaced by a ghostly silence. The cry came again, closer this time, trembling against the gusting wind. Following the sound, Leora found herself in a narrow alley beside her workshop. There, almost hidden against the walls and nearly buried in snow, was a tiny dragon child. Its scales were frosted over, and its small wings shivered violently. Its eyes, wide with fear and pain, met hers, pleading without words. Leora's heart tightened. Dragons were rare and often feared in the city. Many had been hunted or captured, yet this creature was clearly innocent and helpless. For a long moment, Leora hesitated. The cold reminded her of the dangers outside, the biting wind, the ice, and the possibility of hunters. But something stronger than fear pushed her forward. Kneeling carefully, she extended a gloved hand. The dragon flinched, claws scratching at the snow, but the tremor in its eyes revealed more need than fear. Leora spoke softly, letting her voice carry a gentle warmth. "It's all right. You're safe now." Slowly she scooped the dragon into her arms. Its tiny body trembled violently, frost flakes falling from its scales. She wrapped it in her thick scarf, pressing it close to share her body heat. The dragon whimpered softly but did not struggle. Leora's heart ached at its vulnerability. She hurried back into the workshop, closing the door against the storm. The warmth hit the dragon immediately, and it let out a tentative sigh, curling into the folds of the scarf. Inside, Leora set the dragon on a bed of blankets near the furnace. She moved carefully, giving it space while keeping a watchful eye. Fetching a shallow bowl of warm water and small pieces of preserved meat, she offered them to the creature. The dragon sniffed cautiously, then nibbled gently, hunger overtaking fear. Relief washed over Leora. Something as simple as food and warmth could be enough to save a life, she realized, and she would do whatever it took to protect this fragile being. Hours passed, and the dragon began to relax, though it remained wary. Leora made a small nest using soft cloth and scraps of fabric, placing it where the heat from the furnace would reach it. She noticed how tiny and fragile it seemed, its wings too small, body weak, eyes wide with lingering fear. She knew it could not survive alone in the snow. She spoke to it quietly, telling stories of her workshop, of the toys she made, and the warmth it could now feel. The dragon's breathing gradually evened out, and its eyes tracked her every movement. The storm raged outside, but inside the workshop, a fragile peace began to settle. Leora stayed close, checking the dragon's frost-covered scales and gently rubbing its tiny limbs to restore circulation. She hummed a tune she had once used for her mechanical birds, and the dragon's breathing became steadier. Slowly, life returned to its small body. As night deepened, Leora wrapped herself in a thick blanket beside the dragon's nest. She stayed alert, watching over the little creature with unwavering focus. Outside, the wind howled, snowdrifts piled high, but inside there was warmth, protection, and hope. She thought about the city beyond the workshop walls, the hunters who might come seeking dragons, and the tiny being in front of her who now depended entirely on her. This night marked the beginning of something profound. By dawn, the storm had begun to fade. The dragon was breathing steadily, wings curled gently, and its eyes half closed in trust. Leora watched it sleep, a quiet sense of triumph filling her chest. She had given it warmth, food, and protection. Simple acts, yet powerful enough to save a life. The frozen cry that had led her to this tiny dragon had also led her to a new purpose. The workshop had become a sanctuary, a safe haven against the cold, harsh world outside. A fragile dragon, shivering and alone just hours before, now rested securely in the hands of a human who chose kindness over fear. That single act, opening a door, offering warmth, showing care, was the start of a story that would ripple far beyond the snow-covered streets, shaping the lives of both human and dragon in ways yet unseen. And as Leora looked at the tiny creature curled in blankets, she knew that one simple choice, a decision to help, had changed everything. It was the first step of many, a beginning of trust, courage, and the promise of a bond that could withstand storms, fear, and the icy trials of the galaxy. Leora woke early to find the tiny dragon still curled in the blankets she had arranged near the furnace. Its breath was slow and steady, a clear sign that it had survived the night, but the shivering tremor in its wings reminded her that it was still weak and wary. She moved quietly, careful not to startle it. "Good morning, Ember," she whispered, using the name she had given the dragon the night before. The dragon lifted its head slightly and blinked at her, eyes wide and cautious, but not fearful. She carefully prepared a small bowl of warm milk and finely chopped food, placing it near the edge of the blanket. Ember sniffed, then took a few cautious bites. Its movements were stiff, unpracticed, and hesitant. Leora knelt beside the tiny creature, speaking softly as she fed it. She realized that trust would not come quickly, but with patience and care, it could grow. Each small act, offering food, warmth, and gentle words, was a step toward building that fragile trust. Throughout the morning, Leora observed Ember's behavior. The dragon was intelligent, aware of its surroundings and quick to react. It flinched at sudden movements, its tail flicking nervously whenever she adjusted the blankets. Leora understood that fear had become a habit for the little dragon, and she resolved to show it that humans could be safe, dependable, and kind. She began by making simple toys from scraps of wood, cloth, and leftover mechanical parts. A small rolling ball, a dangling string, and a miniature wind-up bird caught Ember's attention immediately. The dragon's eyes followed the movements of the toys, curiosity overcoming caution for brief moments. Leora sat quietly, letting Ember explore the toys at its own pace. The dragon's wings twitched as it stretched them slightly, testing strength and movement. Every time Ember inched closer to her, she rewarded it with a gentle touch, careful to avoid startling it. Soon, the dragon allowed her to stroke its soft, frosted scales without pulling away. The small victories gave Leora hope, and she could see the beginnings of a bond forming, a bond built on patience, empathy, and gentle guidance rather than force. By midday, Ember had grown more comfortable. It even began experimenting with small movements, testing its wings and balancing on the blankets. Leora encouraged these attempts with praise, clapping softly and smiling. "Yes, you can do it. That's very good," she said. The dragon's eyes brightened at her words, a spark of understanding passing between them. She realized that intelligence and communication were not always about language. Gestures, tone, and consistency could convey trust and reassurance just as effectively. In the afternoon, Leora decided to teach Ember simple routines. She placed a small heated dish in a consistent spot and guided the dragon to it, repeating the same actions several times. Ember began to recognize the routine, moving with increasing confidence. Leora's careful attention to patterns and repetition reassured the dragon, showing that humans could be predictable in ways that were safe and comforting. Every step forward was small, but it marked real progress. As evening approached, the storm outside had subsided, leaving a blanket of snow across the streets and rooftops. Ember, now more relaxed, nestled near the furnace, wings tucked close but no longer trembling. Leora sat beside the dragon, crafting a small mechanical bird to entertain it further. She wound it carefully and placed it near Ember. The dragon tilted its head, eyes following the toy, and then tentatively touched it with a tiny claw. The bird rolled slightly and Ember chirped in surprise, a soft sound of curiosity and delight. Leora laughed quietly, the sound warm and genuine. It was the first time she had heard Ember make a sound beyond its frightened cries, and it filled her with hope. Night came quickly, and Leora prepared a simple meal for herself, careful not to disturb Ember. The dragon had settled into a comfortable pattern. Eat, explore toys, rest near warmth, and return to Leora's presence without fear. Leora realized that trust was growing, fragile but undeniable. Every small interaction had contributed. The warmth she shared, the gentle words, the careful guidance, and the freedom to explore safely. Each gesture reinforced the idea that humans could be allies, protectors, and friends. Before resting herself, Leora arranged the blankets so Ember would remain warm throughout the night. She sat beside the little dragon, her hand brushing its scales lightly. Ember leaned into the touch, a gesture of acceptance and trust that warmed Leora's heart more than the furnace ever could. In that quiet moment, she understood that patience and kindness could nurture not only life but also courage. The first full day with Ember had passed. A fragile trust had begun to form, small but steady, like the beginnings of a fire in the cold. Leora watched the dragon sleep, wings gently rising and falling, and thought about the journey ahead. One day Ember would be strong, agile, and free, but for now, it needed her care and guidance. In the stillness of the workshop, surrounded by tools, toys, and the faint glow of the furnace, Leora realized that the bond she was forging went beyond species or fear. It was a connection built on patience, empathy, and understanding. A reminder that even in a harsh, frozen world, a single act of kindness could transform lives. As the night deepened, Leora whispered softly to Ember, "You're safe now. We will face the world together." The dragon twitched its tail, a small sign of acknowledgement. It had learned something important. Humans could be trusted. And Leora had learned something equally important. Courage and kindness were never wasted, even in the coldest and loneliest of places. The workshop, once a simple place of creation, had become a sanctuary. And in that sanctuary, a fragile trust had taken root, one that would grow and endure, shaping the lives of both dragon and human in ways neither could yet imagine. The first light of dawn broke over the icy city, casting pale gold across the snow-laden rooftops. Inside her workshop, Leora moved quietly, careful not to wake Ember. The tiny dragon stirred in the blankets near the furnace, wings twitching slightly, and blinked up at her with wide, trusting eyes. The bond between them had grown steadily over the past days, fragile yet strong, built from patience, warmth, and small acts of kindness. But outside the workshop, danger was beginning to stir. Rumors had started to spread about the dragon's presence. Hunters and scavengers, drawn by the promise of rare dragon scales and the chance of profit, had begun prowling the icy streets. Leora knew the city was no longer safe, but she could not abandon Ember, not now. She had saved its life and she would protect it at all costs. She adjusted the blankets around the dragon, whispered soft encouragements, and began preparing a plan to keep them both safe. By midday, Leora noticed strange shadows moving outside the frosted windows. Figures wrapped in thick cloaks slipped through the snow, their footsteps careful, deliberate. Hunters. She clenched her fists, heart racing. If they discovered Ember, the little dragon would be captured. Or worse. Leora knew she needed to act quickly, using both her wits and the limited resources of her workshop. She gathered scraps of wood, mirrors, and small mechanical toys. In the past, she had crafted these items for children, but now they would serve a new purpose. She arranged them strategically near the windows and doorway, creating decoys and distractions. The mechanical toys, when wound, could roll or flutter, catching the light in a way that confused the shadows outside. Leora had no illusions. It was a small defense, but any delay might give her the chance to hide Ember or escape. The hunters grew bolder as the afternoon wore on. Their shadows stretched across the walls, moving with practiced precision. Leora held Ember close, whispering softly, "Stay calm. You're safe with me." The dragon shivered slightly but did not resist. It had begun to understand that Leora was not just a source of warmth, but also a protector, a guardian in this harsh, dangerous world. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed through the workshop door. The hunters had found her building, or perhaps they suspected someone was hiding inside. Leora's heart pounded. She placed Ember gently on a padded shelf behind the furnace, giving it a safe space where it could hide from sight. Then, taking a deep breath, she opened the door just enough to speak. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. The hunters peered inside, scanning the room, their eyes cold and calculating. Leora kept her hands visible, hiding nothing, but also hiding everything that mattered. The mechanical toys rattled faintly on the shelves, creating a soft distraction. One hunter stepped closer, reaching toward a blanket near the furnace. Leora moved smoothly, placing a small mirror in his path. Sunlight hit it and flashed into his eyes, making him flinch. "That's nothing here," she said, her voice steady. "Just a small workshop. Go away before you hurt yourselves in the ice." The hunters hesitated, unsure. They had expected to find a dragon or at least some valuable treasure, but the workshop seemed ordinary, warm, and empty. Leora's calm demeanor and clever use of light and sound had bought them a few crucial moments. Without warning, the hunters muttered curses and withdrew, disappearing into the swirling snow. Leora waited until their shadows vanished completely before moving toward Ember. The tiny dragon looked up at her, eyes wide with awe and relief. Leora picked it up carefully, holding it close. "It's all right," she whispered. "You're safe." Ember nudged her gently with its snout, a small gesture of trust and gratitude. Leora smiled, realizing that courage was not always about fighting, it was about thinking, planning, and protecting the ones who could not protect themselves. As night fell, Leora reinforced her workshop, blocking windows with wooden panels and draping extra blankets across the doors. Ember curled up near the furnace, wings tucked in, while Leora sat nearby, crafting more toys and devices that could serve as decoys if needed. Each small creation was a reminder that ingenuity and patience could be as powerful as any weapon. Over the next few days, Leora taught Ember to be alert, to respond to danger, and to hide when necessary. The dragon learned quickly, instinct and intelligence combining with human guidance. Together, they developed a system. Small gestures, quiet warnings, and signals that allowed them to move safely around the workshop without alerting the hunters. Ember's trust in Leora grew stronger with each success, and Leora's confidence in the dragon's abilities grew alongside it. One evening, as the wind howled outside, Ember leapt onto Leora's shoulder, letting out a soft chirp. It had grown more agile, more confident, and more willing to participate in their little games and routines. Leora stroked its frosted scales gently, whispering encouragement. "You're learning fast. Soon, no one will be able to catch you without my help." The workshop, once a simple place of creation and warmth, had become a fortress of trust, ingenuity, and survival. Leora and Ember were no longer just human and dragon. They were a team united by care, courage, and the shared need to face danger together. Outside, the snow continued to fall and shadows moved in the distance, but inside, a fragile yet growing strength had taken root. By the end of the week, Ember was stronger, more alert, and able to move quickly around the workshop, testing its wings and agility. The hunters had not returned, but Leora knew they could. She also knew that, with patience, cleverness, and the bond they shared, neither she nor Ember would face the future alone. They had survived the first test, and their trust in each other had proven stronger than any threat in the snow-filled streets. In the quiet of the night, Leora whispered to Ember, "We've faced shadows together and we will face more. But I will always protect you." The dragon's soft, trusting chirp was the answer. In that moment they understood something important. Courage, ingenuity, and a bond built on care could overcome fear and danger, no matter how dark or cold the world outside might be. The morning light reflected off the snow-covered streets, turning the city into a shimmering, frozen landscape. Leora packed a small bag with supplies, warm cloths, preserved food, and a few of her mechanical toys. Ember, now stronger and more alert, perched on her shoulder, wings twitching in anticipation. Today they would leave the safety of the workshop behind. The city was no longer secure. Hunters had learned of Ember's presence, and the risk of capture grew with every passing day. Leora had made a decision. They would find the hidden sanctuary she had heard of from distant travelers, a place where dragons could live without fear and humans could protect them. The streets were quiet, blanketed in thick snow. Leora kept to the shadows, her movements careful and deliberate. Ember's small body pressed close against her, occasionally shifting to look at the world around them. Its wings were growing stronger each day, and now they flapped with tentative power, lifting it briefly into the air before settling back. Leora smiled at the tiny display of strength, knowing that each day brought them closer to freedom and safety. Their journey began cautiously. Leora led Ember through alleyways and narrow streets, avoiding the main roads where hunters might patrol. The wind was harsh, carrying a biting cold that made her face sting, but the warmth of the dragon on her shoulder gave her courage. Occasionally, Ember would nuzzle her neck or chirp softly, a small reassurance that they were moving together as a team. Leora had taught the dragon to respond to simple signals, and their silent communication made their progress smoother and safer. After several hours, the city gave way to open plains of ice and rock. The landscape was harsh, unwelcoming, but free from the dangers of human hunters. Leora set Ember down carefully, allowing it to test its wings in the wide, open space. The dragon hesitated at first, wings trembling, then pushed against the wind and lifted briefly. Leora clapped softly, cheering the small victories. "Good, Ember. You're learning. Soon you'll be able to fly longer." The dragon chirped happily, circling her before returning to perch on her shoulder. As they moved farther from the city, the terrain became treacherous. Sharp cliffs, icy crevasses, and deep snowdrifts challenged their path. Leora used her tools and wits to navigate, placing wooden markers to remember safe routes and tying ropes across tricky passes. Ember learned quickly, hopping over small drifts and using its wings to balance on slippery ledges. Leora's careful guidance and the dragon's growing instincts made them a capable team. During one particularly harsh blizzard, visibility dropped to almost nothing. Snow whipped around them, stinging skin and scales alike. Leora pressed Ember close, wrapping it tightly in blankets she had brought, shielding it from the worst of the wind. They found shelter in a small cave, hidden beneath a ridge. Leora built a fire, using scraps of wood and dried moss, and fed Ember warm food to restore its energy. The tiny dragon huddled close, warmth spreading through its shivering body. Leora watched it carefully, understanding that each trial they faced together was teaching the dragon strength, courage and trust. The following days were a test of endurance. They crossed frozen rivers, scaled steep cliffs, and navigated dense forests of frost-covered trees. Ember began to fly longer distances, sometimes leading the way while Leora followed cautiously. At night, they rested together, sharing warmth and speaking softly to each other. Every night strengthened the bond that had begun in a small workshop. Every challenge made them more resilient. One afternoon, as they reached a high plateau overlooking a valley, Leora saw it, the sanctuary. Hidden among jagged cliffs and snow-covered peaks, it was a place untouched by hunters or humans who sought profit from dragons. She felt a wave of relief and anticipation. "We're almost there, Ember," she whispered. The dragon chirped softly, wings flapping in excitement. Leora could see the creature's trust and courage shining through, grown from the journey they had shared. Before descending into the sanctuary, Leora paused to prepare. She removed Ember's bindings and let the dragon stretch its wings fully. Ember circled her, chirping and fluttering, showing both confidence and joy. Leora knew this moment was important. The dragon needed to feel the freedom that awaited, but also remember the safety and guidance she had provided. With a gentle hand, she encouraged Ember to soar toward the valley. The dragon hesitated for a heartbeat, then leapt into the air, wings strong and confident, gliding over the snowy cliffs. Leora followed on foot, descending carefully into the valley. The sanctuary was as beautiful as it had been described. Cliffs and caves forming natural shelters, warm thermal springs, and forests of frost-touched trees providing both food and hiding places. Dragons of various sizes and ages moved within, some curious, some wary of newcomers. Ember landed near them, chirping and exploring, while Leora watched from a distance, heart swelling with pride. She had guided the dragon safely here, through storms, ice and danger. As night fell, Leora sat on a ridge overlooking the sanctuary. Ember rested nearby, tired but content. The stars above shone brightly, reflecting off the snow in a dazzling display. Leora realized that this journey had not only strengthened Ember's body and wings but had strengthened their bond. Together they had faced peril, harsh landscapes and fear, and together they had triumphed. Leora whispered softly, "We made it, Ember. You're safe now. This is your home and I'll always be here to guide you." The dragon chirped in response, nuzzling her hand, a small gesture of trust and gratitude. The journey to safety had ended, but their story was only beginning. The tiny dragon that had shivered alone in the snow was now part of a greater world, one where kindness, courage and partnership could redefine the meaning of survival. As they settled for the night, Leora knew that the bond they had formed would endure far beyond this sanctuary. Together they had navigated the harshest of challenges, proving that trust, compassion and courage could carry them through even the coldest and most dangerous places in the galaxy. The morning sun reflected off the frozen peaks of the sanctuary, casting a golden glow over the valley. Leora watched Ember, now stronger, flapping its wings with confidence, circling among the other dragons that called this place home. The tiny creature that had once shivered in her workshop was now vibrant, curious, and brave. Leora felt a deep warmth in her chest, knowing that the act of kindness that had saved Ember's life had changed far more than just a single dragon's fate. It had created a ripple that would be felt across the sanctuary, and eventually the wider world. Word of the sanctuary began to spread, not through words but through deeds. Travelers who passed nearby carried tales of the little human who had guided a dragon to safety. Dragons in distant lands, through instinct and subtle communication, seemed to sense that the human had offered trust, warmth, and protection. Leora realized that her actions had become a symbol, proof that compassion and courage could bridge the divide between species, turning fear into understanding. In the following weeks, Leora explored the sanctuary, helping dragons acclimate to the safety of their new home. She taught Ember to interact carefully with others, to share warmth and food, and to recognize signals of threat. The dragon in turn became a teacher and protector to younger dragons, passing on the lessons learned in the snow and during their flight from the hunters. Leora observed with quiet pride how the tiny creature had grown into a guardian, strong yet gentle, courageous yet wise. One afternoon, while walking along the cliffs, Leora saw a small group of dragons approaching from a distant peak. Their scales shimmered in shades of red, gold, and silver. At first, the sight was intimidating, their presence commanding attention and respect. But Ember chirped and flapped its wings, running to greet them with confidence. Leora followed cautiously, watching as the dragons studied the small human and her dragon companion. Instead of aggression, the larger dragons showed curiosity. Ember demonstrated gestures of trust, circling around Leora, nuzzling her gently and chirping softly. Slowly, the visiting dragons relaxed, understanding that the human posed no threat and that her bond with Ember was built on care, not fear. Leora realized that her actions had created a bridge, one that connected humans and dragons in a shared understanding that transcended survival. The sanctuary flourished under their combined efforts. Dragons learned to coexist peacefully, sharing hunting grounds and resting areas. Leora built small shelters and maintained pathways that were safe for both dragons and humans who visited to learn from her example. She taught empathy, patience, and respect, lessons that had kept Ember alive and thriving. Other humans who arrived were inspired, eager to participate in the care of these magnificent creatures, learning that courage and kindness could overcome barriers that seemed insurmountable. One evening, as the stars reflected off the icy valley, Ember perched on a rock beside Leora, wings folded neatly, eyes bright and alert. Leora looked around at the sanctuary, dragons of all ages resting safely, humans moving carefully among them, laughter and gentle roars filling the air. She realized that a single act of kindness, the decision to save a freezing, frightened dragon, had transformed the lives of countless beings. The sanctuary was not just a refuge, it was a living testament to the power of compassion. A soft wind blew through the valley, and Ember lifted into the air, circling high above before landing gracefully beside her. Leora smiled, reaching out to stroke the dragon's scales. "We did it, Ember," she whispered. "We made a difference. Not just for you but for everyone here." Ember chirped in agreement, nudging her hand, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had carried them through fear, storms, and uncertainty. News of the sanctuary spread far beyond the mountains. Travelers and scholars arrived, seeking to witness the harmony between humans and dragons. They marveled at Ember, the once fragile dragon who now guided others and embodied trust and courage. Leora shared her lessons freely, teaching how patience, understanding, and gentle guidance could bridge divides and create allies where once there had been only fear. As the years passed, the sanctuary grew. Dragons and humans coexisted, learning from one another. Ember became a leader among the dragons, known for its wisdom and bravery. Leora continued to guide newcomers, ensuring that kindness and respect remained the foundation of the sanctuary. Every small act, feeding a frightened hatchling, teaching a human to read dragon signals, protecting the valley from hunters, reinforced the lesson that one individual could change the course of lives through courage and empathy. One quiet night, sitting on a ridge and watching Ember sleep beside her, Leora reflected on the journey they had shared. From the frozen cry in a lonely workshop to the vibrant, thriving sanctuary, every challenge had been an opportunity to teach and learn. She realized that true strength lay not in power or dominance, but in the courage to act with kindness, even when fear and danger loomed. Leora whispered softly to Ember, "You were meant for greatness, little one. And together we have shown the world what courage and care can do." The dragon chirped softly, curling closer against her warmth. The stars above sparkled as if echoing their triumph. A single act of kindness had grown into a legacy, a living testament to the power of empathy, trust, and courage. In the heart of the snowy valley, a human and a dragon had changed the world. And the story of that frozen cry, a small act of care, and a journey through danger would echo across generations, inspiring others to act with compassion and bravery. The valley was no longer just a sanctuary, it was proof that one heart willing to help could reshape the fate of many. And so, beneath the glittering stars, the bond between human and dragon endured, a symbol of hope, trust, and a kindness that could truly change worlds.